You can hear it. Please let me know if it's too loud. It's quite loud already, isn't it? I'll talk quietly. Okay, so thank you for coming. I have a few slides. We won't necessarily use all of them, many of them at all, but I thought it was good to give a structure because sometimes I get a bit lost if I don't have something to work from, and we don't want that. So the first thing I'd like you to do is put up your hand if you are here because you think you'd actually like to introduce a research experience into your large undergraduate class. 1, 2. Large, okay, so that's the first question, right? What's large? So for an ALURE, a large can really be anything more than about 5 students, but it can be 1,000 students. It doesn't really matter, it's very flexible. So just put up your hand again if you think you would like to do that. Okay, good. So we've got someone at each table. That's the important thing because what I didn't want was the legitimate peripheral participants all sitting together. The people that don't actually want to do one but are here to learn something, because I actually want you to design while you're here today. So I've got to get out of this now and go into my slides. Good. All right. So this talk comes from a lot of work that we've done in SCMB, but not just us in SCMB. We've done this with other schools at UQ and also other universities across Australia and actually other universities in other countries now as well. So the project was actually originally funded by Faculty of Science, and then we grew that into an OLT project. So many of the results that I'll show you today, or things that I'll show you today, are things that we learnt while we were doing that project. But they're also things that we've learnt just from our own practice. Today's structure. Identification of attendees who are thinking of designing a large-scale ALURE. We've done that. And a room reshuffle. We don't need to do that. Great. Introduction to ALURE, and then workshop design time interspersed with short presentations and feedback from critical friends and supporters. So there's not going to be a lot of me just talking. There's going to be a lot of you working. That's what you want, right? Hassan? Yes, good. Excellent. While we move around or not. We don't need to move around because we've got somebody at each table who wants to design something. So I want you to think, while we're just doing this introductory bit, I want you to identify a large group, and again that can be anything more than about 5 students, a large group of your students who might benefit from an undergraduate research experience. So URE, undergraduate research experience. What could they research? What question could they ask? This is actually the part that people find most difficult. Why would it interest them? Why would they care? And who else cares about the results? So who can the students tell? These are the things that we've found to be most important when we're introducing a large-scale undergraduate research experience. The students need to care about the thing that they're researching, and they need to know that there's somebody else out there who cares as well. So it shifts it from the idea that they're doing something just so you can assess it, or actually so that they can assess it. You know how students always talk to you about how they wrote the lab manual? They don't even realise that you wrote the lab manual as the academic. But especially if they're doing an undergraduate lab, they think that they need the results. Whereas if they're actually doing it for a defined audience and you can tell them who that audience is, they have a much greater sense of ownership associated. So it's important to think about what they can research, why they care about it, and who else cares, so that they have an audience and they're accountable to that audience. It makes them much more interested in whether the results are real and much less interested in just fudging the results when they realise that they have to present them to somebody else. It doesn't mean they're going to get up and give a talk. They might be making a website. They might be collating all of their results into a data sheet that goes to somebody. They might be helping you write a report for a local council. It doesn't matter, but the results need to be real. Team ALURE. So this is the team, our team from the OLT grant. So that's me there, looking younger. Gwen Laurie, Kirsten Zimbardi, Jack Wang, Paula Myatt, Pete Worthy and Rihanna Pedwell. And we have a website here that you can go and take a look at. So I'm going to give you some resources today. Those resources are actually all on this website here, and I'll put the address up a little bit later again. So you can go in there and you can get all of the resources from that website. And then if you want to take a virtual tour of the SCMB labs, you can take them here. So an ALURE always happens in the regular undergraduate research labs. That's something important about it. You don't put the students in the professional research labs. They're just in the regular research labs, which is why you can accommodate 1,000, but you can also accommodate 6. If you try and put more than about 3 or 4 in a professional research lab, you know it gets pretty crowded. So that's why we describe this as large. It's anything that we really can't accommodate in an academic research lab. So these are the outcomes and deliverables that we had from the OLT project. And again, all of this information is on that website, so I'm not going to read it all out to you in great detail. But we do have exemplars, we have implementers checklists, we have evaluations, and we're also just finishing up writing a HERDS a Good Practice guide on UREs. So we have pretty much all the chapters of that written at this point. We hope we'll get that finished in the next couple of months. What is an ALURE? So people, when you say, oh, we'll do an ALURE, people don't really understand what it looks like, so I'll just describe what it looks like to you, because it's a very broad model. Usually people think to themselves, oh, I've got this idea for what I want my students to do, but that's not an ALURE. And then so they cut themselves out of the idea very quickly, but actually it probably is. So it's a hands-on research project in the undergraduate labs, or the clinic, or the undergraduate workshops. So it's something where the undergraduates are there in their normal undergraduate teaching environment. They don't have to go in the professional labs or the professional clinics. Projects are part of authentic research initiatives. We'll come to that word in a minute. And the results are communicated to somebody who cares. It allows many students to participate, and it varies by year level, by your desired learning outcomes and your discipline, so there's no single model. Again, the literature shows that if you produce a single model and a single exemplar and you give it to people and you say, implement that, in the university level, basically you get 0 uptake, because academics are creative people, and people don't want to do somebody else's project or somebody else's plan. They want to do their own for their own students, and that's the flexibility of the ALURE model. So there are various different ways that we can think about undergraduate research. We can think about a lab or a workshop or an investigation as really recipe-driven. We can then go into guided inquiry, open inquiry, and then your research internship in your research labs, your professional research labs. And ALURE actually sits across quite a spectrum of this. It's basically anything with different levels of scaffolding depending on which students are doing it, where the students are doing real research. This is the model. Again, if you are an undergraduate researcher in a professional lab or a professional clinic, it's generally going to be you sort of supervised by the academic, whereas in ALURE it's lots and lots and lots of students supervised by the TAs in a sort of loose conjunction with the academic researcher. So the academic researcher doesn't have to be there all the time, which is again the thing that allows you to expand this to lots and lots of students. Why are we using this word authentic? The first paper we ever tried to write up where we used the term ALURE, we got back from the reviewers, why is it authentic? Reject. And so we wrote a paper on authenticity to deal with that, and now we can now cite that paper whenever we are writing something else. What we did to define what authentic is was a literature review over the last 15 years in science education, and we used a whole bunch of keywords related to authentic science education, and then we just did thematic analysis, and this is what we've got out of it. What we see is that by far the most frequent definition or use of the word authentic is people talk about what scientists do. So students who are experiencing authentic education experience what scientists do. Now, if you're a physiotherapist or if you were a historian or any other kind of discipline, it doesn't matter. You just put your discipline in there instead of scientists. So they experience the practices, they experience how it's done, and they experience what it is. That's extremely vague, isn't it? But it means that something that's authentic gives students the sense of what this thing is in the real world. There are all of these other ways that we can define it. They're far less common than these understandings of what science is. And so interestingly, what we have done is gone in and done analysis of our student reflections, and even things that we don't design for authenticity, the students see as authentic. But they see it as authentic in a different way. So they understand, for example, they will say, if they're doing a recipe-driven lab, they'll say, I now understand how much time scientists put in to do their work. Or I now understand that it's really important to be accurate. Or I've got a much better understanding of what I need to do when I'm making a solution. It's much more process-driven. What we find is that the student reflections around ALUREs are much more things like, I now understand why I need to keep records, because if I don't keep records, I can't remember what I did, and that means I can't, I can't report it. And they'll even say things like, I used to just be able to copy my results from my friends. Right, so it's actually much more about ownership when the students give us reflections on ALURE. And I also say things like, I understand now the frustration of not being able to get any results. Because if they don't get results, they don't get results. We don't give them the results. Right? Whereas they would just be able to get them from their friends in a recipe-driven prac. And they also start to understand a lot more about sharing and collaboration, because they need to depend on each other, because we, in the way we deliver this, deliberately give them the protocols, the ideas, and we drop them. And we say, we're here on the side of the lab and we will help you when you get stuck. And no matter how much they come and say, tell me what to do next, we say no. And that, the more you do that to the students, the more you scaffold them with a sort of Socratic, what's your next step, as opposed to this is your next step, the more ownership they take, and actually the more positive the feedback at the end. Once you start to help them too much in ALURE, they start to complain that it's not real anymore. So that's actually really important learning. A couple of examples. So this is one that Jack Wang runs. This is a microbiology ALURE. And again, if you're not a scientist, I don't want you to think that you can't do this. So I'm just showing you what one of them looks like. So Jack wanted, with his class of 500 students, to do a research project, quite time intensive to do a research project with, this is second year students. And what they were doing was essentially bacterial characterisations using Bergey's manual and all of the old methods. He wanted to be able to do 16S RNA sequencing, and he wanted to turn that into a research project. And so what he did was got the students to do a human microbiome. They used various different parts of the body in different years. So far they haven't gone below the neck, but the students are keen to go to other parts of the body. So they've done the ear, they've done the mouth, they've done the scalp. And what they do is they do a little bit of plating and general characterisation so that they know how to do those techniques. And they also do a 16S sequencing, ribosomal RNA sequencing. And then what they do, once they get that 16S RNA sequence, is they put it all together into a big spreadsheet. So every student contributes their data. Of course, it's all anonymised. And then the students can ask whatever research question they want related to that. They have to show their statistical analysis, they have to present the results, and they have to make the decisions about how they're going to present it. This work has been used as the basis for publications from the Hugenholtz lab. This is another one. This was done by Jan West at Deakin University as part of our project. Wonderful partners to work with. So this is a physiology lab where they had students, they had no lab space, it was all had to be workshops. And what they devised was that the students were going to do a project where they ate chocolate, and that was the best bit according to the students. So they ate chocolate, and then they did luminosity games, and they investigated whether they were better or worse after long-term eating of chocolate. And then what the students did was they put all of their data again into spreadsheets. They were able to ask whatever question they wanted, and they had to present their work at the end. And the reason I've got a computer at the start and the end is because they were presenting using an e-portfolio. They also had some scaffolding lessons around what is a hypothesis, all that kind of stuff. Right? These were early year students. Now, this was a raging success, even though they had no lab, and they actually ran this for 150 students with 3 academics and no tutors. What did the students learn? Well, they actually have multiple learning gains. We have explored them here in these papers. I'm very happy to give you these papers if you want to see them. I'm not going to read all of this out. It's stuff that I've already talked about. But what we do see is that the students who come through to our fourth year in SCMB are overwhelmingly students who've done an ALURE. It seems to create a cohort of students who are interested in research, keen to talk about it with each other, and then they stay with the school. And it's a lovely way to encourage that kind of ownership for students and that sense that they belong somewhere. All right, so now we're going to do some work, some design for you guys. I'm finished with my talking. Again, on the website, we have some resources, and we've developed these 4 implementers checklists: design and logistics, motivation and value, support for students, evaluation. We're actually going to work with the design and logistics one. I've brought it for you today. It's a bit weeny, so don't worry. I don't expect you to read it all on this size. I just wanted you to be able to see. We're going to work with this top box up here. What research question will my students investigate? What makes this ALURE authentic? What do I want students to learn? How will I assess them? And what equipment and resources and things do I need to do this? Right, so that's our goal for today. Now, what I want you to do is, anyone who wants to design an ALURE or thinks they might even have something in their head they might want to work with, somebody, I want you to come get some paper and some texters. And one of these. And don't all move at once. Go. Okay. There you go. So the first thing I want you to think about, and of course feel free to talk about it with those around you, is what students are you going to design for? So I'd like you to pick a specific group of students. You can choose the entire cohort of a class, or you can actually, what I do for my biochem class is that actually we just allow 60 of the students to do it, and the other 680 students choose not to do it. And this was a way that we dealt with a cohort which were really unhappy. Some of them were saying the lab's too easy. Some of them were saying the lab's too hard. So what we did was bifurcated it so that 60 of them choose to do the ALURE and the rest do the more recipe-driven lab. And allowing that choice has dramatically improved the student satisfaction. Even though the recipe-driven lab is actually not any easier than it was before, the complaints about things being too hard have gone down dramatically. So the power of choice is really important. So if you are thinking, oh, I think I'd like to introduce this, but I don't think that all of my students could cope, but you can think of a group of your students in your class who can cope, it's okay to design just for them. All right, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to think about which group you'd like to work with and why those students. And then I'm going to ask you to tell me. And if you have questions now, just feel free and I can help you. So what input do you need then?
So we just ran the first run course this semester, and so it's just a fact-based course, and it's like using all the sorts of principles you're talking about.
Yeah.
She's just saying she would chat to you about the evaluation
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
But so it's already running. I guess what we could think about is a different module. So we've got 3 modules. We could think about an alternative module.
Or what we're going to use as the exam to us. The story we frame it around. It doesn't have to stay the same.
No.
Of course, the elements that could change by using it.
So maybe we could work on that module and what an alternative is, or an alternative exercise module.
Or even you had a specific target that you had, but that wouldn't have to be the same.
Yeah, my section has got, it doesn't have to be the same, but it's more about the learning process about letting go of being scared of fail. That's really what my section is.
Absolutely. And that's the most important thing, isn't it? Stepping into the liminal space.
And I don't think what Paul and I were able to do in the second module of that course would have been possible if we had them do that.
Yeah.
So let's design another module.
Yeah, because you didn't actually have a chance to implement it.
Yeah. It just gives us a different module we can use.
Yeah. Yeah.
With brainstorming and
Yeah. No, that just do, you know? Yeah, it just gives you a bit of space. It's fun, yeah. It gives space to think.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm just off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe that could be an area of research for some of the students to put together the materials that will be used for the modules later on. So then they know that it's actually going to be used in a course that they might do or some of their colleagues.
What level are those students?
Well, I think they're going to be doing them at second year level. The poetic students are, I think, first and second year. Yeah. But yeah, so that would be a way.
Give an audience for all that to do differently. Producing a larger group data.
Okay, good.
Then getting them, allowing them to use their own
Okay, you've got 2 minutes, and then I'm going to ask you to report. All right, let's have a pause now. So I want to hear from everybody who's designing. Yeah, you're designing. How many have we got? 4 designs running or more? People aren't willing to admit. All right, so we'll say we've got 4 right now, but anyone else who wants to speak up, feel free. All right, so what I want you to do is just give us a really quick, sorry, every time I go near that, I start getting feedback. So that restricts me to this part of the room. so you can escape. So what I want you to do is give me a quick rundown of the group of students that you're thinking you want to design for, and if you could give us your name and your school and discipline at the same time, that'd be great, so everybody understands where you're coming from. Could you go ahead for us?
Hello, I'm Glenys. I'm from the School of Social Science. I teach archaeology at undergraduate level and advanced. What I'm thinking of is to have either a first or second year course. We've got 2 courses in first year and 1 in second year that would be appropriate for this project. And I'd like to have students looking at objects that we have in our museums, which we know nothing about, so it would be good for them to investigate and report on that, so we can have a report up on the website and the catalogue of the museum about these objects and build up, I guess, an object portfolio over time.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really excellent. All right, go ahead.
I'm from business school.
What's your name?
I'm Andy.
Hi.
And from business school, I'm teaching hospitality management. So actually, I'm explaining about my class. In my class, I don't do many lab, but I have some research assessment components in my course. So that what I'm doing is that to the second or third year students, and ask them to go out to figure it out what the actual restaurant management or operation is going based on certain questions. So that I give the guidelines how to evaluate the service in the actual restaurants and try to figure it out how the theory and actual performance is different. So that whatever they found in terms of the gap between the theory and the actual, and they're going to come back and they're going to report. So this is how I design, so that I don't ask the students set up the research question per se, but I just give, this is the guideline, this is what you have to follow, but any gap you found, just come back and report.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right.
Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm from the School of Communication and Arts. So I teach in literary studies and in poetics. Next semester I'm running a course on writing poetry. And at the same time I'm also helping, one of my colleagues is putting together a new bachelor, which is going to be for literature and writing students. So it's going to be a really interdisciplinary degree. So what I'm thinking is maybe I could set up a research project where the students in poetics could start to research some of the materials for a module which is going to be part of this new bachelor's degree, which will involve a field trip where we'll take students to either Stradbroke or Moreton, the Moreton Research Station, and have a series of lectures and creative workshops and stuff. So maybe I could do something where a section of the poetics students can be putting together using, right, we've got the OSLIT database, putting together some of the materials which will be useful for students in the module in the bachelor.
Nice. Saves you work as well. Of course, you have to check it all, but you know, it's really nice to get that creative input from the students, isn't it? Yeah, that's great. Well done. All right.
We were discussing the genetics major in the School of Biological Sciences at ALURE. And we decided that what was missing there was a high-level prac experience that really gave the students independence and ownership. Yeah, because so we designed a prac course, purely prac course, that was to allow students who don't go on to do honors, which most of our students do, to actually go to the workplace and feel somewhat competent and be able to just step in and do things. And then also the same experience would be beneficial to all the students. And we have students from our school and from the School of Molecular and Chemical and Molecular Bioscience. And yeah, so we just engage them in genetics and troubleshooting, accepting failure, and analyzing data. So it's been quite a good experience for them. But we've gone through 1 year now. We're
So you're designing a second module now. Excellent. So what I'd like you to think about now is, I mean, it sounds to me as if you're actually already thinking about the research question. What we've found when we talk with people, and maybe this is just a science thing, is that they have a great difficulty translating what the students are doing into a research question. So I'd like you now to spend a couple of minutes writing down what you think the research question is, because the students want to know as well what is the research question. It sets it apart from doing a project. Yeah? So let's think about that. What is your research question? Under the radar design here. You've got under.
Michael and I just talking about our health and rehab sciences research methods course. Physio, speech, OT, radiology.
Yeah.
Showing
We've had a few emails and we've never actually sat down for the meeting. Yeah, but we should.
So we've just finished the second year of it. In 3 hours, it's nearly over. They're submitting all their research projects at 5 p.m. That's a good point, Michael. We're still going crazy. And we're saying that the students come up with their own research questions in their own words.
Which is fine.
In the context of healthy activities.
Yeah. And what sort of questions do they come up with?
What is the experience of pet owners in depression and anxiety?
That's a whole phenomenology.
Yeah, so it's mixed methods. So they do a
Okay.
qualitative study and then a quantitative study.
Okay.
Michael's highlight real interviews.
Okay, so they actually go and do some real interviews.
They interview transcribe.
It's fantastic. You guys are all way ahead of where you don't even need to be here. But do you know, we just discovered that you can get transcriptions done through YouTube.
YouTube?
Yeah, so if you get a recording and upload it to YouTube, it transcribes it for you and gives it back to you as a transcribed file.
And that's just software.
It's just the YouTube software because it's there to provide subtitles.
That's amazing.
So it's basically
So you don't have
instantaneous.
to tell it to do anything special?
No, we'll ask Pedro. Pedro's just
How do you make sure it's a private YouTube video?
yeah, you have to make a private account. Yeah. But that's pretty good, isn't it?
It is.
It saves so much time and money.
If you make it a private account, then can you just send that link to people so only they can share it?
Look, it's a good question. We're going to ask Pedro, who's here, because Pedro told me about it this week. I think somebody from UQX told him.
So if you were just searching in YouTube,
So if you just want to use it for transcribing, you can upload as much stuff as you like, and no one else will know. And to access it, you just share
I suppose you could use that in MOOCs because it's only
Yeah,
people that
we
apply
don't
for
use
the
it
MOOC.
because the quality's not good enough, and we find that if you get it professionally transcribed, it's faster than having it badly transcribed and then having to edit it. Because we need our transcripts to be really good.
It's a good start.
Yeah, absolutely.
But because we'd already designed the research course, we would know the literature.
Thinking just, we were talking before about interactions between humanities and the sciences. If your umbrella research term is something like, how can humans be healthy or whatever, you could even bring in, because there's a lot of new work done now on the link between mental health and writing. In fact, Phil Nielsen, who teaches in the poetics course as well, he co-authored a book looking at mental health and that way, you could have your people could be looking at pet ownership and also like writing poetry, etc. for mindfulness. So that would be a way of doing like a cross-disciplinary school, research that the students.
You're going to have your island people writing poems. Yeah.
One of the examples you gave seemed to be the students all participate in creating a data set,
Yes.
and then they create the questions after they
Yes,
have the data set.
that's right.
Is that a fairly common sort of?
Look, it's a good. It depends on the discipline. So from micro, the overarching research question is, what does the human microbiome look like in this group of humans at this body part? That's the overarching question. And then the students can ask sub-questions within it. What proportion of the students have gonorrhea? Or other things like that, or is there a coincidence between having gonorrhea and a particular type of E. coli or something like that? So they can do various statistical analyses, and they make up whatever they want, whatever question they want, and then they have to decide what statistical analysis they're going to do, and they have to present the appropriate analysis. So that's actually a way of getting them to design methods and design a testable question. For biochemistry, it's really, really hard to do that in biochemistry because it's so methods driven. So we actually give the students the question, but we let them choose some different options in terms of what they're going to analyse, this sample or that sample, or because what they do in my lab is they test or they purify, they overproduce and purify a toxin that's been not yet characterised, and then they quantitate how much of it they've got, and then they test it on some insects to see if it kills them, because we don't know if it's going to kill them. We know it doesn't kill mammals, but we don't know if it's going to kill this particular group of insects. And so because it takes such a long time to actually get the sample, you can't just let them invent the method, because they'll get nothing. And they get quite frustrated by that. They want to be able to invent the method, but for them, they need to understand that when you're doing something that's very method-based, you're always going to be walking on, shoulders of the giants who invented it for you before. You can't always be coming up with something new. So it depends. It depends on what the discipline allows. But there's no right or wrong. It also depends on what learning objectives you're going to have. Do I want my students to be able to understand how to develop a testable hypothesis in biochemistry? Well, yes, I would like that. But can I, within the limits of this prac? No. So it depends on how you can set it up, what's possible.
I also think it's also dependent on your level that you're testing. So
Absolutely.
In the first and second year, it's going to be more important for them to understand basic technique and understand.
That's exactly right.
Learn how to use the techniques. And for example, third year, they can probably utilize that knowledge to advance.
Yeah, absolutely right. And the other thing is, because we're running it alongside a more recipe-driven lab, we need to make sure they get the same skills.
Yeah.
Because if I have one group of students out there just doing something really radical that doesn't align with what the other students are doing, I'm suddenly into a situation where a student could legitimately say, I got something on the exam that I hadn't done in prac because our prac was totally different. And that other group of students was advantaged over me. And that would be really bad. So we design very carefully so that the students get the same basic skill sets, but one lot have the capacity to fail and the other ones don't. Like the ones who are recipe driven, there's always a backup. Whereas the ones who fail, they've lost their sample and then they have to join another group and work with them. But they have an impetus to not lose it. They don't want to have to work with another group.
Using other means than just CCAS?
Yeah, I can talk about that. I can definitely talk about that.
Yeah, we've only done 2 years, but last year CCAS didn't represent to me
No, it doesn't at all. Yeah, I can talk about that. All right, no problem, we can do that. All right, so we might stop now. I'm just going to get you guys to do a quick report out. I can see that people are really doing very well in terms of a lot of people have already designed stuff, and I don't want to bore you, so we can move on to a little bit of evaluation stuff. So I just want to do a quick report out in terms of What research question and who cares about it and why the students care? That's good.
In my particular case, I think the research question will change by group and
Yes.
by year, because these objects are the gifts that keep on giving. Because one group can look at, like, what is this object made from? The other group can look at what techniques are used to half this object. Another one can identify what species of feather is on this object.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a whole lot of small questions that go into analysing what is this object.
And that's actually really beautiful, isn't it? Because you can keep it new and fresh every time.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is great, because of course the students know, you know, if you're reusing something old, they're not silly, and they know that it's just a rehash of something another student's already done, and they immediately lose interest,
Well, that's right.
which is fair enough.
And everyone looking at the museum objects and the schools will be interested to know the results. And
Yeah.
they build upon previous work. So
It's really lovely.
yeah.
Terrific. Well done. All right.
Yeah, the research question that we had, or that I have, is that what are the critical missing components of theory X? And another one was, how can theory X be improved throughout this research? And who cares is going to be the students as well as the restaurant owners.
Mm-hmm. So they can feed it back
Yes.
to the restaurant owners.
Yes.
That's terrific, because there's a huge impetus there not to fudge things. The restaurant owner will know. they're the absolute authority, aren't they? So the student has to get it right, and that's terrific. Well done. All right.
So for the poetry project, I guess the research question would be, how have writers engaged with the Moreton Bay area? Why would the students care about it? I think they would be quite interested in the fact that they're generating materials for their co-students, and also for a course that they themselves might be doing further on in their writing of theory studies.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
They do take great pride in that. I've had master's students doing that, and that they do take a lot of pride in the idea that other students are going to be reading their work. These guys are shy. All right, go on.
So for our project, one of the modules in the course was on toxicity of phosphine, which is a gas related to Tim's PhD project. And so for Who Cares, we told them that Tim was going to be using this information to develop the next stage of his PhD. And so fudging data was something that he wouldn't want to see, because
Nice.
that could stuff him around pretty significantly.
Absolutely.
And then the research question, it was too broad this year. It was kind of, here's what we know about phosphine toxicity. There's a lot that's not known. These are kind of the edges of what's known, and we gave them a set of strains for epigenetic gene suppression and a set of toxic chemicals that could affect metabolism and other things.
And they were just lost.
And said, pick something
They were good.
that will match up. And I gave them a matrix that follows. They had some structure that, okay, if we test this against this, this is how we would do it.
Yeah.
And so then they just had to pick out a couple of reasonable things to test. And I would say at least 2/3 of them did very well.
Tim,
What I might say, what I felt happened to make that fun
I'm listening.
last semester,
Yep.
it may well be that the research question we gave them was about phosphine toxicity. But ultimately in the experiment, the application of phosphine was just one of about 4 simultaneous interventions done matrix style.
Yep.
And the ones who were, the tutors who were engaged in the were just talking about it. I think what they really were doing were creating their own research question.
Which is great, right? So if you give them something that's too broad, but they do have the opportunity to refine it, then they will.
And what got really excited about it, they picked a lifespan gene they knew or were interested in, threw some chemical at it that made sense in the context of that gene. And then the phosphine toxicity thing was kind of just the background over which that was tested. I don't know if they
So
about it in their tests, but I would expect that maybe they would actually said, I was interested in the effect of such a thing on this cool gene.
yeah. So what I'm hearing from you there is that you were impressed with what they could do, and I found the same thing. You know, I just had, because what people often say is when you go to build one of these things, they go, oh, the students can't do that. Actually, they can. They can. So I'm going to briefly, we're supposed to finish now, I'm going to briefly touch on evaluation, because you asked about evaluation. I won't finish the other slides that I have, and that's fine. we use a few different tools. So the first thing we use is this thing called the URSA. Yeah. And I'm really happy to help you use the URSA tool. It's a well-validated tool, and it's quite effective, and it gets students to self-report gains in a number of different areas, number of different domains that are related to becoming a scientist. Now, you could actually reword it. I'm not sure you could do it for becoming a poet, because it's about being an investigative person, but I mean, you are investigating in terms of, but you might actually, oh, you know, maybe I'm going to take that back. Yeah, you might be able to do it. Yeah, so it's undergraduate research, self-science assessment or something like that. But anyway, I'm very happy to help you use it. It's a really great tool. The other thing that we use, we get them to do a pre-post self-assessment of skills. So the things that are in URSA are much more abstract, whereas you know, things like I feel a sense of ownership, or I feel that I could solve a problem, or I feel that that I understand what failure is about. yeah, right. Yeah. So it's a validated tool, so it's actually good because you can check it internally. The pre-post self-analysis of skills, we actually just list a set of skills, and before they do anything, we ask them how they'd rank themselves. And then after they finish the lab, we ask them how they rank themselves. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is very visible there. The students who don't know what they don't know rank themselves much higher. But we do see very significant gains. And then the other thing that we use, and this is a really useful little tool, which we developed actually out of a sort of camp counselor, American camp counselor method, which is the roses, buds and thorns reflection. So we ask the students at the end of their experience to tell us one rose, a good thing, one thorn, one thing that's not so good, and then a bud, which is an emergent possibility or a new understanding. And this short reflection, you limit it. You say you can't do more than half a page because you really don't want to be reading that much and you don't want them to write that much. This is really profound, the stuff they come up with. And it's not the kind of thing that they put in the CCAT, because you're asking them for an emergent possibility, a new idea, a new skill that they have, something they've discovered about themselves. And they give you some really, really useful stuff in there. So this is easy to implement, and it's also really easy to mark. If you do want to give them some marks for doing a proper reflection, they don't have to get stressed out about it. And some of them even draw lovely pictures. They can do it in cartoon form if they want to. It doesn't really matter, but it gives them a lovely structure that works nicely. They're really the three things that we do. I mean, you can, if you want, do mastery tests as well. There are lots of other tools, and actually I can give you the evaluation chapter that we've just finished for this undergraduate research good practice guide, because we have lots and lots of resources and tools in there. They're the three that we use consistently, but there are others. So I'm happy to help you with those. All right, we have come to the end of our time. 1 hour is very short. So thank you very much for coming. I hope this was helpful, or that you got to share some interesting ideas with one another. Please let me know if you would like to talk any more about this, or if you'd like any other help or resources. Thank you for your time.